66 million years ago, the dinosaurs had the worst day in the history of days. An asteroid roughly the size of Mount Everest slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula, traveling many times faster than a rifle bullet. In a single instant, it released energy on the order of billions of atomic bombs and set in motion what many consider the most violent and abrupt extinction event this planet has ever endured. We call it the KPG extinction. And when the dust settled, literally, roughly 3/4 of all species on Earth were gone, with almost nothing above about 55 pounds making it through. Among the fallen were the most iconic animals that have ever lived. The non-avian dinosaurs, who by that point had ruled the land for something like 165 million years. And because it happened so suddenly and so violently, we've come to talk about it in a very particular way. We call it the day the dinosaurs died. There are documentaries with that exact title. It's a powerful phrase. It's also a question worth pulling on, because did they really all die on one day? Think about it for a moment. In the late Cretaceous, dinosaurs were on every single continent, and researchers estimate there were over 1,000 species alive when that rock came down. Some were armoured, some were enormous, some were small enough to slip in under that survival threshold. The idea that every single one of them simply blinked out of existence within a single rotation of the Earth is, on its face, a little hard to swallow. And in fact, most paleontologists agree the death of the dinosaurs was not truly instantaneous. Which means, technically, there were dinosaurs alive in the Cenozoic era, the age of mammals. The question is, for how long? Days? Years? Centuries? And the honest answer is that this is one of the great open arguments in paleontology, with estimates ranging from a handful of years to, brace yourself, 1 million. So let's walk through it. Start with day one, because it was as bad as you're imagining, and then worse. For anything in the Western Hemisphere, the immediate effects were simply unsurvivable. Extreme heat, blast waves, earthquakes, tsunamis, and firestorms. Animals as far as 1,500 miles from the impact were killed within minutes. And here's the truly horrifying part. Distance didn't save you either. The impact threw an almost unimaginable quantity of material, possibly around 25 trillion tons, up into the atmosphere and beyond. And for a while, that ejected material was several times hotter than the surface of the sun. So when it came raining back down across the entire globe, it turned the sky into an oven, cooking anything caught out in the open from the outside in, and igniting fires in something like 70% of the world's forests. That alone left very few animals standing, but it didn't leave none. In sheltered places, marshes, deep humid forests, high latitudes, pockets of dinosaurs would have made it through that first terrible day. Not the big ones, though. The survivors would have been small species and perhaps juveniles. And then came the part that finished the job. All that fire and dust and soot rose into the sky and stayed there, blotting out the sun. Global temperatures may have plunged by as much as 20 degrees Celsius. The world fell into darkness. And darkness is a death sentence, because without sunlight, plants stop. And when plants stop, everything above them starts falling like dominoes. This impact winter is widely regarded as the final nail in the coffin. But this is exactly where it gets murky, because nobody knows how long that winter took to kill the last of them. A large body of research suggests the survivors hung on for at least weeks, months, possibly a few years. And there's a grim logic to who lasted longest. The herbivores were doomed almost immediately. Their food had burned. A lucky few might have found surviving pockets of vegetation, but those wouldn't last. The carnivores, ironically, probably outlived them, because in the immediate aftermath there was one thing in horrifying abundance: carcasses. But once the plant eaters were gone and the carcasses ran out, the meat eaters followed them down. One of the more recent studies puts a startlingly specific expiration date on the dinosaurs: 15 years. The idea is that all that material in the atmosphere sustained a 15-year nightmare of cold and darkness, with photosynthesis almost entirely blocked and completely halted for at least a full year. In that window, the scattered surviving dinosaurs simply dropped, one by one, freezing or starving. Other studies land in similar territory, most within a century. But not everyone buys that. And here's where the argument gets genuinely fascinating. A rival camp argues the end wasn't quick at all, that it was drawn out, that small, isolated populations clung on well into the Paleocene, meaning entire generations of dinosaurs were born, lived, and died in the age of mammals. Most of these longer estimates fall in the range of a few thousand years, but some go much further. One 2013 study suggested it took around 33,000 years for the impact event to finish off the last non-avian dinosaur. And just sit with what that would mean. Over that stretch, the world would have visibly changed around them. Mammals creeping up in size, insects booming, large turtles and crocodilians becoming the biggest animals in the neighborhood. A genuinely strange new world for a dinosaur to find itself in. And in this scenario, it wasn't the asteroid that finally killed them, it was the competition. The mammals and the surviving reptiles slowly, quietly outcompeting the last of the old rulers. 33,000 years, by some calculations, could amount to over 1,000 generations of dinosaurs living in the Cenozoic. And astonishingly, that's not even the boldest claim. A few researchers have proposed that some dinosaurs held out for up to 1 million years. Which brings us to the most controversial fossils in this entire debate, and they come from an unlikely place. Not some remote refuge at the ends of the earth, but Colorado and New Mexico, relatively close to the crater. In the San Juan Basin, a team reported finding the remains of hadrosaurs, tyrannosaurs, ankylosaurs, and even sauropods in sediments dated to the Paleocene, roughly 500,000 years after impact. Now that raises two enormous questions. How could they possibly survive that long, and why there, of all places? The lead researcher offered 3 ideas. First, that the local terrain, perhaps canyon-like, sheltered them from the worst of it. Second, and more plausibly, that these dinosaurs weren't originally from there at all, but had migrated down from further north, somewhere like Alberta, where the immediate effects were less severe, and then been pushed south by cold and hunger until they stumbled into one last habitable refuge. And the third idea is the most haunting of all, that no adult or juvenile survived the impact. Only the eggs did, buried in nests, small and shielded, and that they hatched once the worst had passed and against staggering odds rebuilt a population. If any of that were true, these animals would have watched the world recover. They'd have shared their landscape with brand new creatures that evolved after the asteroid. But, and it's a very large but, the paleontology community has largely rejected this. The standard counter-argument is simple and devastating. These aren't Paleocene dinosaurs at all. They're ordinary Cretaceous fossils that eroded out of older rock and got washed into younger sediment. a phenomenon called reworking, which creates exactly this illusion. The original team pushed back hard, pointing out that many of the bones were still articulated. One hadrosaur had 34 bones lying in perfect anatomical order, which is very difficult to explain if they'd been tumbled downstream. It's a fair point, but today the claim is mostly considered invalid. And here's a genuinely important update, because the San Juan Basin has been re-examined recently, and the new work points the other way. A detailed study of the site found that dinosaurs there were diverse and stable right up until the very end, contradicting the idea that they were already fading. The authors concluded that non-avian dinosaurs were abruptly struck down at the end of the Cretaceous and were not in long-term decline, which is a striking result. The very location that produced the strongest survivor claim now offers some of the best evidence that the end was, in fact, sudden. So where does that leave us? As of today, the youngest dinosaur specimen accepted by science is a triceratops that seems to have died right around the time of the impact itself, possibly killed by the blast. And that's the honest answer to the question. We don't know. The most defensible position is that the vast majority died within the first day, and the stragglers followed within years or at most centuries. The million-year survivors are almost certainly a mirage created by shuffled sediment. But almost is doing some work in that sentence, and I find I can't quite let it go, because it's a wonderful thing to imagine. A last hadrosaur, somewhere in a sheltered valley, grazing in a world that had already moved on without it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep looking up.